Today, we're going over the best champions to solo carry with in every role in patch 13.5. This patch was another pretty big one with another shift in the meta, and some new champions are sharing the spotlight. We're going to start off with support for a change today, and first up we've got the nasty, the stealthy, the reset king, Pyke. Pyke is fantastic at solo carrying games due to his very unique kit and his playstyle as well. He has super high mobility and burst damage, allowing him to roam around the map and take out enemies and really snowball the map harder than most supports. Pyke is also really slippery, so he can quickly escape those dangerous situations with his W, which means if you do get super fed, you're also hard to shut down, which means people can't get your bounties, which means you got a better chance of winning and carrying, and yeah, you get the point. In addition to all of this, his passive also allows him to regenerate health, and he gets gold for kills he participates in, making him a formidable threat even when behind. And then of course you've got his ultimate, which gives him the potential to take out multiple enemies in quick succession and carry teamfights too. Pyke's ability to quickly secure kills and escape danger makes him a super strong pick for any player looking to carry games on their own. And when Pyke is in a good spot in the meta like he is right now, well, there's no better time to play him. Next up, we've got another hooking, roaming carry support, and of course, it's Blitzcrank. Now, Blitzcrank is just so good at carrying games, mainly because of his ability to single-handedly control teamfights and catch out unsuspecting enemies with those massive clutch hooks. Yes, this is his trademark ability, and if you're good enough on this, you can honestly carry games with just landing this ability and forgetting about the rest of your kit. If you land hooks in lane, you're going to feed your AD carry. If you land hooks in the mid game, you're going to feed your team objectives. And if you land those hooks in the late game, you're going to feed your team the victory. It's not just all about the hook for Blitzcrank though. His ultimate provides him with an AoE silence that can disrupt enemy abilities and get rid of all shields too. He's also got his passive, which grants him a shield that increases with his mana, making him more durable in fights. And then you've got that W speed up and the lockdown with your E as well. Blitzcrank's ability to control fights, get fed in the lane and pick off enemies throughout games all make him a super terrorizing pick to play against in solo queue. Our third and final support is surprisingly going to be Senna. After her recent buff, she's really sprung back into contention, and now she's not only viable, but she's actually really damn strong. Now, whether you're an auto-filled AD carry and you still want to do the business, or whether your AD carry just doesn't really have any brain cells, Senna has the ability to be that marksman from the support role, and in the later stages of the game, you can seriously 1v9. Yes, your scaling passive makes you an absolute terror in the later stages of the game. You have crazy range, super high damage, good poke, and fantastic contributions to teamfights with your sustain and your ultimate as well. Speaking of that sustain and poke, this is really where you shine in the lane phase. And although you are extremely vulnerable to engage and hooks in that support role, you can also be a serious bully. Basically, as long as you don't get too far behind on Senna, you're always going to have the tools and the damage to really outscale your enemies. And if you know how to position correctly, you know how to kite, and you know how to contribute without getting bursted, Senna definitely has the damage and the capability to carry any game. Well, let's move down into the jungle now. And first up, we've probably got the best jungler in the game, Jarvan. Yes, Jarvan is having the time of his life, from those seriously strong early ganks to crazy amounts of disruption and CC in teamfights. Not only is he a fantastic initiator, but he also packs boatloads of damage as well. And when it comes to solo carrying games on Jarvan, it really is about ganking as many lanes as early as often as you can, and snowballing the game seriously quickly by yourself. Jarvan can gank from as early as level 2, he's fantastic at ganking any lane, and he's one of the best junglers in the game when it comes to repeat ganks. And what I mean by that is taking down a lane, ganking them again once they've got no summoners, and laughing as they can't dodge your EQ combo. And then when you get level 6, you just press your ultimate. And if they don't have any flashes or dashes, all they can do is sit there and cry and accept their fate inside that massive rocky wall of Demacia. Jarvan is a pretty basic and easy jungler to pick up and learn, but that doesn't take anything away from his ability to 1v9 games. And right now in patch 13.5, there's not many junglers that are better. Next up, we've got Kindred. Now, Kindred has bounced back instantly in this patch 13.5 after a period of not really doing so well. And the main reason for this is Riot have basically enabled counter jungling again. Yes, you now don't lose out on any damage when taking enemy camps, so now that minigame of collecting marks is back in action for Kindred. Kindred is an AD carry in the jungle who's focused all about counter jungling and shutting down the enemy jungler. Whilst doing this, she collects those marks on her passive and basically becomes a late game monster. Kindred has fantastic DPS, she has great mobility with those Qs, and also has an amazing survivability tool and utility tool in her ultimate. This ultimate can decide fights, it can decide objectives, and it can keep yourself alive as you kite and carry on your own. Kindred definitely takes some practice, not necessarily in her kit, but in her playstyle and her ability to be impactful. If you know how to really terrorize the enemy jungler, if you know all about lane priority and when and how to invade, Kindred is up there with some of the scariest junglers in the game if you know how to use her correctly. Our third and final jungler is Rengar, who's also having a fantastic time in the top lane, so a bit of a flex pick for you Rengar one tricks. Now Rengar basically sums up all the reasons why you'd be good at solo carrying. First up, you've got burst damage. Then you've got his mobility around those brushes, you've got incredible snowball potential, fantastic versatility, and the ability to punish enemies' mistakes. See someone side laning on their own, press your R and one-shot them before they can even react. Rengar is not that great against organised teams, but in the solo queue chaos that we all know and love, when enemies are split up, when enemies are tilted and playing on their own, Rengar just capitalises on this and he can get seriously fed off all of these enemies' mistakes. There is very few things in the game that are as quite as scary as a fed Rengar when you're playing something like an AD carry. And if you walk into the wrong brush, well, you're probably going to die before you even realise. Rengar has lots of different tools to outplay his enemies, from the Q damage to the E's root, and of course the W's cleanse as well. And if you do get good enough at utilising all of these things, you're going to have a lot of fun and success with Rengar this patch. Okay, let's take it over to the mid lane now, and first up we've got an AD carry. Yes, it's Tristana. Now there are many reasons why Tristana is just so good in the mid lane. Firstly, she has a really strong early game. She's fantastic into so many different matchups. She jumps on them with her W at level 2, explodes that bomb in her E, and then jumps on them again. Yes, her mobility is what makes her so hard to play against if you lack mobility yourself, and she can use this up to 3 times if she plays it correctly. Then she's got her ability to wave clear and take towers, and her bomb absolutely shreds through this place, so if she does kill you early game, she's going to get a serious amount of gold from those plates as well. Tristana is also exceptionally hard to gank, so it's really hard to actually get shut down when you are starting to snowball. And not only that, but most people expect it to be played in the bot lane, so in draft it's a great blind pick too. Tristana is super easy to play. She's really easy to be effective on, especially in the lane phase, and she still scales pretty well too, because let's be honest, she's an AD carry. Now you have got to be really careful of that close range AoE CC, but if you can avoid it with those Ws, if you can get super fed, push enemy threats away with your ultimate, you're going to have a lot of fun and you're going to win a lot of games on Tristana this patch. Next up, we've got someone with a fairly similar playstyle to Tristana mid, which is Akshan. Akshan shares the similar strengths to Tristana. He's a great cheese pick, he's really good into lots of different matchups, he can get fed super quickly, he can snowball incredibly fast, and his mobility allows him to get in and get out without too much risk. One thing that Akshan also brings to the table though is his stealth, which means not only can he dominate the lane phase, can get super fed off those matchups, but he can also roam around the map, swing into the bot lanes, swing into top lanes, and burst people down with his ultimate. Akshan is a champion that you never really want to play against, because if he does get a little bit too fed in the lane phase, he's just so hard to play against. You have to basically play like you're playing against a Twitch. He could be anywhere, he could be sitting anywhere ready to ambush you in that stealth. And not only that, one of the best reasons to solo carry on Akshan is the fact that you can revive your entire team by killing the right person. Yes, Akshan really does have it all when it comes to 1v9ing and solo carrying. He's not the best in team fights, he's not the best in team games, but in a solo queue atmosphere, in a solo queue environment, there's not many better. Our third and final mid laner is Annie, and it's pretty obvious as to why she's included, because she's just so broken right now. Annie's win rate is a bit absurd in both the mid and the support roles at the moment, and she's just so easy to pick up, easy to learn, and easy to be impactful on. She's now good from as early as level 1 with those 5-man stuns with her passive ready right from the start. Her laning is super steady, super solid, because she can farm up with Q as well as poking with those massive long range auto attacks, and in terms of her all-in threat, as soon as she gets level 6, she's going to plonk that Tibbers on your face, and good luck surviving it. Throughout games, Annie is an AoE engaging, bursting, crowd controlling monster. Yes, she gets those flash Tibbers off in team fights, and this can be enough to win any fight for your team, secure those objectives, and put the game to bed. Now, solo carrying on Annie is basically all about hitting as many enemies as you can with that ultimate, or just focusing down their highest priority target and deleting them before they can even play the fight. It really is that simple, and if you haven't played Annie yet and you're a mid lane main, you probably need to ask yourself why. Let's shimmy down over to the bot lane now, and first up, of course, it always has to be Draven. Now, if Draven is viable, he always has a place on these solo carry videos. Because if you do have what it takes, you know how to catch those axes and you know how to snowball games, then why would you play anyone else? There is nothing scarier in the bot lane than a talented Draven main. And this works on both sides of the table. If your Draven is on your team, he's probably going to flame you if you miss one hook. If your Draven's on the enemy team, they're going to be 15-0 before the 15-minute mark. Draven's passive is one of the biggest reasons why he is such a threat in the bot lane. Because not only does he get the gold from killing you, but he also gets all the gold gold from those extra stacks that he caught those axes from, which is why focusing Draven is the most important thing on the planet if you're playing against it. If you're playing Draven though, all you need to do is focus on catching those axes, getting those stacks up, cashing in before you die, and GG well played. You probably got 3 items before the enemy AD carries completed their first one. Draven has a ton of burst damage, he's got that ultimate to snipe down enemies across the map, he's got kiting with that W, he's got self-peel with his E as well, and if you are good enough to play Draven on a consistent basis, you're going to climb those ranks at the speed of light. Our second AD carry to play to solo carry games with in this patch 13.5 is Zeri. Zeri has had such a turbulent year of League of Legends. Sometimes she's completely busted and sometimes she's completely nerfed into the ground and turbo useless. But right now she's in a really good spot and winning a ton of games. She is pretty unique in the way that she's played because of how her Q and auto attack work. But once you've learned her, you realize just how strong she can be. Zeri has fantastic poke, good consistent DPS, amazing mobility, and of course crazy AoE damage with her ultimate and those AoE auto attacks. Zeri is a bit vulnerable pre-6 though, and especially before she's got that first item. But once she gets a few items, especially once she gets her 3 item power spike, she becomes so difficult to beat. And when you're playing Zeri, if you're against champions with skill shots and you're good enough to dodge all of them, well, this is genuinely why she's included in this video, because her ability to 1v9 and solo carry is unquestionable. Your enemies are going to need to pick those point and click CC heavy champions like Nautilus ultimates or Vi ultimates, and if they don't, you're going to run riot and probably kill everyone. Zeri does take some practice, you've got to have relatively good mechanics, you need to know how to position, and you need to know how to kite effectively. But if you can do all of this, she's definitely one of the best AD carries in the game to carry with. Our third and final AD carry is not actually an AD carry. It is Veigar, and it seems that people have finally realized just how broken he is right now because his ban rate has shot up significantly in patch 13.5. Veigar definitely has the tools to solo carry, mainly because of his sheer scaling and his damage potential in the later stages of the game. His AoE damage with his Q and W can delete entire front lines running towards him, and his ultimate can one-shot squishies without even blinking. In the lane phase, it's all about farming and scaling, but you also bring massive AoE crowd control to the table to help set up ganks for your jungler, to help prevent enemy ganks as well, and just to keep yourself safe and sound. You can easily impact those early dragon fights with your AoE damage and CC as well, which is just going to lead to you getting those items faster, scaling up quicker, and becoming that formidable AP monster that you become. Veigar is definitely viable in the mid lane too. He's a really strong champion right now after a few too many buffs, and with lots of his other more difficult matchups being nerfed too, he's only getting better. Finally, let's take it all the way back up to the top lane, and our first 1v9 solo carry pick to go for is Riven. She's definitely one of those champions that's so much better the more mastery you have on her. You need to spend a bit of time practicing those mechanics, those combos, those animation cancels, and chaining your abilities together with your ultimate for maximum burst. Then once you've learned all of this, it's all about learning the matchups. And when you've learned all the matchups and all those mechanics, well then you realize why Riven is just so damn good. It really does start with her damage and her mobility and her survivability as well. She's one of those champions you just never want to underestimate because she has the ability to outplay any amount of enemies against all of the odds. Riven is incredibly good at laning and split pushing and taking on multiple enemies in those side lanes, but she can also carry fights by flanking and getting off big backline engages with her big combos as well. As we've mentioned, Riven does require a high level of skill and game knowledge, and you have got to be careful you don't get put behind, especially in those impossible to come back from matchups. But if you can last pick Riven into a favourable matchup and you're good enough to play her perfectly, there's not many better than her. Next up, we've got Olaf, who's had one of the most impressive win rates for a seriously long time now. And it all starts off with his incredibly strong early game. There really isn't too many other top laners that can actually deal with his early game damage output. He wins most 1v1s in those early levels, and if he does kill you, he's going to snowball incredibly quickly. Seriously, all it takes is one kill and Olaf is now impossible to gank, impossible to fight, and you're just going to have to wait and hope that he makes mistakes and gives you those bounties. One of the main reasons why Olaf is so damn good at solo carrying is because of his ultimate. Most champions you can deal with by just locking them down with a combination of crowd controlling abilities, but Olaf presses R, runs at you with Ghost, and yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. Olaf can just get set up in a side lane, especially if he's stronger than all of the other enemy duelists and side laners. He split pushes, he takes down towers, and if he does want a team fight, as long as he's got that flash, ghost, and ultimate available, he's always going to be impactful. There really isn't too many champions in the game that can really counter, deal with, or shut down Olaf right now. And with still a patch with no nerfs, Olaf is still one of the best top laners in the game in general, but especially so at solo carrying in patch 13.5. Our third and final solo carry top laner to play in patch 13.5 is Kled. and he also shares very similar strengths to Olaf. It's all about that early game damage, the ability to outplay the top laner and the jungler even against the odds. He can snowball games super quickly on his own, become unkillable, become seriously hard to beat, and he deals so much damage as well. Kled is one of the scariest champions to play against once he gets fed. His damage is super surprising, and with his passive, his survivability and durability is also really good too. The amount of times I've seen people underestimate Kled. He looks like a pretty easy kill under his tower, but all of a sudden he gets back on his mount, he dashes through you, roots you into the tower, and you're both dead and he's not. Kled also has fantastic roaming capabilities with his ultimate, whether it's ganking mid lane, whether it's resetting and ganking bot lane instead and then taking a dragon. There's so many different ways you can impact games and solo carry on Kled. He does have a bit of a funky playstyle. He takes a little bit of learning to get used to how he actually works. And then you've got to learn all of his different damage limits. But after a bit of a Kled spam, you should know what you're doing. And when you do know what you're doing, you're going to win a lot of games. And that is going to bring us to the end of this video, all about the best solo carry 1v9 solo queue beast champions to abuse this patch in Season 13. We wish you guys the best of luck on your journey in solo queue, and don't forget to mute all, turn off chat, and pretend you're playing co-op versus AI. Jokes aside, thanks for watching, and we'll see you all in the next video. Take care.